Shiny Volvo, shiny Volvo, shiny Volvo, shiny Volvo, shiny Volvo, shiny Volvo, it's shiny. Hi guys! So I have a 20-page script and this video is probably going to be 10 hours long, so I might as well just get into it. So a couple of days ago I was thinking about revising my book collection, which isn't that large by the way, because I have a bunch of books that I read as a 12-year-old that have that cringy type of love story with a supernatural element type of thing going on. So I was thinking about just getting rid of them, but then I thought maybe I should try rereading one of them to see if I can and just torture myself a little bit, because I don't truly remember the plot of any of these books. And then I saw this super tattered up copy of Twilight and thought,
Wow, wouldn't it be hilarious if I were to like reread it and talk about how it was reading it as an adult so many years later on YouTube?
and then I sat down and finished the book in a day. And here I am making a whole video about it. I read this book so much faster than I thought I would. If I wasn't taking notes or I had started earlier in the day, I would have read the book in very much so less than a day. I started reading the book on Wednesday, I finished it Thursday morning, finished the script for this video on Thursday, and now I'm filming it on Friday. I thought this would be a project or video idea that I would never actually finish, because I haven't read an actual book from start to finish in a really long time. So after reading this book, I realized that the movie had clouded my view of this book very severely, because honestly I expected the book or reading the book to be a lot more cringier than it was. I had seen the movie more recently and more times than I've read the book, and even though I have actually read all of the books in the series, my memory of the plot and just the story of Twilight and everything I remember about it is purely based off of the movies. So I want to go over the entire plot of the first book of Twilight, then talk about how it was reading it, my experience, some of the differences with the movie, why I thought the movie fucking sucked and ruined my memories of Twilight, and just some, general questions I have about Twilight and its plot. So first of all, let's talk extensively about the entire plot of the Twilight book. And if it wasn't extremely clear by now, this video will contain every spoiler under the fucking sun. So in case you live under a rock and have no idea what Twilight is about and you are intending to read the book and want it to read it spoiler free, this is it, this is your warning, click away now. And also I have put obviously timestamps in the description because this will be a hella long video. And just in case you want to skip me telling you the entire plot of Twilight, you can do so and just hear me talk about, what I thought about it and just my general experience rereading Twilight. Okay, I have to admit that holding my hand like this and balancing the tiny microphone in the tiny hand is super difficult, so I'm going to remove the tiny hand for this portion of the video, but I promise I will bring it back for the conclusion. Sorry. Okay, so the prologue starts with a very brief, cryptic description of what we can only assume to be a vampire attack, which we will later find out is a vampire attacking Bella. But in chapter 1, we're introduced to Bella Swan, her family, and the fact that she spends most of her time with her mother Esme in Phoenix. And her father Charlie lives in Forks, Washington, a place which she despises because she loves the sun and hates the rain, and it's always raining in Forks. The movie starts with her moving to Forks, which I completely didn't understand, because from what I understood, she spent all her time in Arizona with her mom, except for a month every summer, which she spent in Forks with her father, except for the last 3 years, which she convinced Charlie to vacation with her in California instead. Now, it doesn't say anything about her dad asking her to move there. Her mom says that she doesn't have to do it, and it also says that Charlie is confused about Bella moving there and her wanting to move there. This confusion is later cleared up, but I'll tell you about it in chapter 2. As we are introduced to Bella as a character from her perspective, it is very much so that I'm not like other girls trope is expressed that since she's from Phoenix that she should be tan, blonde, and sporty, but she's not. She's brunette and with dark eyes and knows all the things that she's studying in school and is super smart, etc. And Bella starts school literally the day after she arrives in Forks, and of course there is a mention of a shiny Volvo in the parking lot of the school from day one, which we will find out belongs to the weird kids, aka Edward Cullen later on. We're introduced to the Cullens in the cafeteria, and I have to say that I don't remember Jasper and Rosalie being twins, because one of Bella's new friends describes them as such, so I don't know. I'm still confused about that. I also have questions which I know don't truly matter because, you know, it's just a romance vampire novel and it's meant for teenage girls that don't overanalyze all this shit. But first of all, Bella describes their appearance, specifically their noses and features, to be straight, perfect, and angular. I know vampires are supposed to be very attractive and whatnot, so when you get turned, does it like automatically change all of your face? Like, what if you as a human are not conventionally attractive? Like, you have a giant round nose or slanted eyes or something that's not perceived as, you know, traditionally beautiful. Is it automatic plastic surgery? Is that why being turned into a vampire hurts so much, because they just have to readjust your whole existence? Anyway, why are they in the high school in the first place? Why? Okay, they are here described as looking older than everyone else, like they could be in college or even teachers, except for Edward, who actually supposedly looks around his supposed age. So I don't understand why they wouldn't just be attending college or working. It's not like they need the high school diploma. I'm sure if they needed fake dates for timeline purposes, they could easily fake that. Sure, they might look like younger adults, but you know, they'd still pass off as adults. Like, wouldn't it get so boring to go through high school over and over again for fucking decades? Like, I could barely get through it for the first time. Anyway, Bella has to sit next to Edward in biology, and there's that whole famous scene of Edward gets like a whiff of her and acts all super weird, and she thinks she smells bad or something and smells her hair to check, which by the way smells like strawberry shampoo in case you're wondering. And at the end of the day, she sees him talking to the front office lady, asking if he can switch biology classes, which obviously offends her. In chapter 2, we find out that Edward hasn't been to school since for the rest of the week since Bella started school. This makes Bella feel really conflicted because she thinks it's because of her, but also that that's a super narcissistic thing to think, and there's no way she could be the only reason he stopped going to fucking school. Also, the shiny Volvo is mentioned like 4 times in this chapter. Bella briefly talks to Charlie about the Cullens, and Charlie is extremely defensive of them, saying that Dr. Cullen is a great blessing to Forks and he's a great doctor and Forks is lucky to have him, and that people only talk shit because they're newcomers, and also reinforces their attractiveness. In case you haven't gotten the hint yet, the Cullens are hella hot. Bella sees snow for the first time but actually hates it more than the rain, and Edward is also back on school the following Monday, this time in a much better mood, all happy and cheery. They have class together again, and it is once again established that Bella is super smart and has taken all of these classes before and knows everything. The two finally have a conversation, and Bella notices that Edward's eyes have changed and asks him about whether or not he's wearing contact, which he denies, and Bella thinks it's kinda sus that he's lying about contacts. Edward asks her why she moves to Forks if she hates it here so much, and my question from chapter 1 is answered, that it's because her mom's new husband travels a lot and her mom doesn't go with him because she stays home with Bella, and Bella doesn't want to hold her mom back from traveling, so she's decided to move to Forks and get to know her father better, and to let her mom live her life. So that's at least not a giant plot hole that's gonna bother me. We also see that these guys, Mike and Eric, are super into Bella. In chapter 3, Bella is giddy to see Edward, even though she thinks he's way out of her league, and also she has 2 other guys chasing her. Like, this bitch is fighting off admirers left and right. It's super icy in Forks. When Bella gets to the school parking lot, we get the famous scene of Edward saving Bella from certain death as Tyler loses control of his van, which was sliding at high speeds towards Bella and was about to crush her, but Edward jumps in front of her and leaves a giant ass dent and lifts the whole ass truck off her leg so it doesn't get crushed. But of course tell everybody else that, you know, Edward was right there and just pushed her out of the way. Bella, Tyler, as well as Edward are rushed off to the hospital, with obviously Edward not having a scratch on him. Bella knows it's not due to a concussion, that she remembers that Edward was nowhere near her and that he left a giant dent in the van, and that he didn't just push her out of the way. She confronts him about it, but he of course just insists that he was right there, and no one would believe her that he had lifted the truck. She just wants to know what the hell happened and says that she wouldn't tell anybody anyway, but it's left at that as Edward leaves and Bella is discharged by Dr. Cullen from the hospital, who once again is established to be looking real fine. In chapter 4, Bella is starting to dream about Edward, but Edward has now decided to just ignore her existence. There's going to be a dance at the school at some point, which is girl's choice, and Jessica asks Mike to go with Bella's permission since Bella is not interested, and Bella says to Jessica that she will be out of town for that weekend anyway. Edward finally speaks to Bella again, saying that they shouldn't be friends, and she thinks that he just straight up regrets saving her life for some reason. Since Bella turned Mike down for the dance, both Eric and Tyler attempt to ask Bella to go to the dance with them. They're basically throwing themselves at her at this point, but she still persists that she won't be in town that weekend because she's going to Seattle. Tyler says they'll still have prom, and you'll remember that for later. Also, Edward cuts off Bella in the parking lot with his car while waiting for the rest of the Cullens, and Bella just thinks about just yeeting into the back of his shiny Volvo, but didn't because there are too many witnesses. And honestly, with the way Edward was acting, I would think about doing the same. Later, she parks far away from him because she might get too tempted to wreck his fucking car and doesn't want to owe him a new one. Bella has a giant crush at Edward for some reason at this point, but is frustrated because Edward is just, you know, all over the place. Then out of nowhere, Edward asks Bella if he can take her to Seattle because her truck has awful mileage. She's obviously confused because he just said that they shouldn't be friends, but then he says just because we shouldn't be friends doesn't mean I don't want to be friends. But she decides to accept his offer to go to Seattle with him anyway. Now Edward's done another whole 180 and is just super friendly with her, asks her to eat lunch with him, and the shift is obviously confusing to Bella, with the switching between talking to her, not talking to her, saying they shouldn't be friends, and saying he wants to be friends, you know, it's a mess. I'd be like, what the hell too? He says that he's given up on being good and staying away from her, but still says that she should stay away from him if she knew what's good for her, but then also he's the one pursuing her now. Anyway, at lunch, Bella and Edward have a conversation, and Edward asks Bella to tell him one of her theories about, you know, Edward's strange behavior, and she tells him that it's radioactive spiders. So does she think he's fucking Spider-Man? Anyway, it is then established that he's dangerous, and what if he's the villain, not the superhero in this story, fitting his dark and mysterious persona. Anyway, Edward skips class, and very conveniently too, because that day in biology they're doing something with their blood to test their blood type or something like that, and Bella starts feeling sick in class because blood makes her woozy, and Mike takes her to the nurse's office, but she faints in the hallway. Of course, Edward shows up right away and scoops her up and carries her to the nurse. She doesn't want to go to gym, so Edward gets her out of it by getting the permission of the nurse to take her home in his shiny Volvo. Also, yes, every single time the Volvo is mentioned, it's shiny. In chapter 6, Bella and her friends go on a beach trip, which she promised to go on some chapters ago. She doesn't really want to, but she's already made the promise, so she's keeping her word. They go on a hike in the area, and when they return to the beach, we finally meet Jacob as one of the boys who lives on the reservation. I also don't remember Jacob being this young, because apparently he has just turned 15, and Bella has been 17 for a while now. Anyway, Jacob tells Bella about the story of the Cold Ones and the reason that the Cullens don't go to the reservation. Apparently there used to be a clan of quote-unquote the Cold Ones, aka vampires, that used to live in the area that weren't supposed to be dangerous to humans because they only drank animal blood, so they made a treaty with the local tribe not to go and hunt on their lands, and that's the reason the Cullens don't go on the reservation, because according to myths or legends, Cullens are that same clan that they made a treaty ago, generations ago. Jacob just thinks these are legends and myths at this point. In chapter 7, Bella of course cannot stop thinking about this story about the Cold Ones, and she dreams about Edward as vampire fighting werewolves. She decides she can't ignore it anymore and decides to do some research on vampires. Also, can I mention that this story, at least the book, takes place in an era where there is still dial-up internet, at least in Forks, Washington. She then feels ridiculous because she's researching mythical creatures and thinking that Edward is one of them. Plus, she has seen the Cullens out in the daylight, and vampires sleep in coffins and go out only in the night, and they can and burn in the sun, right? So she just feels silly about it. Then she goes to school and it's a very sunny day and she finally doesn't complain about the weather. much. Mike asks her to dinner and she turns it down, pointing out that Jessica's into him. And Jessica asks Bella to join her and Angela to go dress shopping for the upcoming dance, which she accepts. In chapter 8, they go dress shopping, but Bella leaves the group to go see a bookstore. It doesn't have what she wants, so starts heading back, but she doesn't know the area very well and easily gets lost, finding herself in a bad part of town and realizes she's come to a dead end and being surrounded by some scary fucking dudes. Out of nowhere, headlights and Bella's savior in his shiny Volvo. He takes her to dinner and she tells him she notices that he's in a better mood when he has lighter eyes. She tries to figure out how the hell he knew where she was, and he straight up just tells her. He tells her that he was following her through reading the minds of the people she was with and that he lost her for a while, but eventually found her in the thoughts of those dudes in the alleyway and didn't actually let her leave to go home with her friends because he was scared that if she left him alone, he would go and murder them. And then he's like, okay, ready to go home now? And she's like, okay, bet. Like, she's taking this information way too well. Like, honestly, how did she not think he was like messing with her at least a little bit about the mind reading stuff? Like, obviously this dude is like a little bit weird and like dark and mysterious or whatever, but he just straight up told you he can read minds, and you think that's all chill? Plus, at the moment, she has zero proof of that. Like, sure, he found her and knew where she was, but he could have just been following her. And since he can't read her mind, he can't even prove it to her, so she just takes it at face value. So in chapter 9, they're driving home and Bella's questioning Edward about how the whole mind reading thing works. Also, Edward drives like a fucking maniac and severely above the speed limit. Here, Bella discovers that he is in fact a vampire, and she says that it doesn't matter to her whatever the hell he is, and he gets pissed because, what do you mean it doesn't matter to you that I'm not human? Anyway, he explains that daylight burning and stuff and sleeping in coffins is a myth, that vampires don't sleep, and that he'd show her some other time about the light thing. They still can't go into sunlight with other people seeing them, and yeah, and that he'll show her later. Then at the end of this chapter, I had forgotten about this quote, but when I read it, I laughed because I'm sure that this was a blurb for this book and as well a direct quote in the movie. Yeah, it's literally on the back of this book. About 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him, and I didn't know how dominant that part may be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. Like, bitch, you met 2 weeks ago and he like just talked to you for like the 3rd time. But go off. So in chapter 10, Edward picks her up for school in the morning because apparently he's breaking all the rules now. Also, apparently the Cullens all have really nice, fast, shiny cars. And the reason they ride that shiny Volvo to school is to be less conspicuous. Edward warns Bella that Angela wants to know everything about their relationship and wants to know if they're secretly dating and how Bella feels about him. Edward asks her to say yes that they are dating because it is the least complicated answer, but still also wants to know how Bella feels about him because he can't read her mind. They talk about how Edward probably really likes her with Angela and that she likes him too a lot. And then Edward and Bella have lunch together where we find out that eating food for vampires is basically the same as humans eating dirt. And also they make a lot of jokes about Bella being super clumsy and attracting danger. Edward asks if she really wants to go to Seattle, and if not, that they could spend the whole day together and he would show her what he meant about the sun. And we also find out that grizzly bears are Emmett's favorite choice of meal. Chapter 11 is just Edward finding out about Bella, her interests, her favorite things, etc., and ends with a quote-unquote complication from Edward when he takes her home and feels that Jacob and Billy, his father, is approaching the house. Billy is there to visit Charlie, and clearly Billy recognized Edward and made a face or something, and Jacob tops it up to him being a superstitious old man. Apparently Charlie and Billy haven't been on great terms lately and haven't been talking for a while because Charlie chewed out Billy for the fact that most of the people on the reservation have refused to go to the hospital on the account that Dr. Cullen works there. The next day, Bella is again picked up for school by Edward and he asks her another billion questions about herself, And the next day they're going to spend the whole day together, and Bella is super excited and she can't fall asleep because of it, so she knocks herself out with cold medicine. The next day Edward takes her somewhere out to the woods and then makes her hike like 5 miles. That is so much. And without warning her that there would be such a long hike, I would be so pissed. Anyway, the chapter ends up with them in a meadow and Edward stepping into the light. In chapter 13, Edward is all sparkly, like thousands of diamonds are on his skin. She's touching his arm and stuff, but then it gets a little bit too close for him, so he does like a second long lap around the meadow and then like breaks a tree or something to show how he's such a predator and could kill her so easily or something. He apologizes and compares her to heroin, but like really good heroin, and that's the reason why it's so dangerous for them to be around each other. He talks about how he like really wanted to kill her like all the time, especially at the beginning and when they met, and actually wasn't at school because he yeeted off to Alaska and was planning to just permanently run away from his problems, but then he decided to just come home. There's a lot of soft caressing of faces before it's time for Bella to go home, and she hops onto Edward's back and they yeet through the forest at impossible speeds, which makes Bella motion sick because of course it does. But then she kind of chills out a little bit and they have their first kiss, woo! And Edward manages not to kill her. Chapter 14, we find out a little bit more about Edward and his family and his origins. He's born in 1901 in Chicago and was turned when he was 17 by Carlisle when he was dying of the Spanish influenza. He explains the Cullen family and the order in which they joined, which was obviously Carlisle, then Edward, Esme, then Rosalie, then Emmett, and finally Alice and Jasper. This again confused me a little bit because again there was the mention of Rosalie and Jasper being twins, but clearly they're not, so why do people think they're twins? I don't know. He explains that the reason that they are in high school is that if they pretend to be younger when they move somewhere, the longer they can stay there. But if they already look too old for school, how did they pass that off 2 years ago when they would have looked even older for what they're supposed to be? Also, allegedly, they arrived in Forks like 2 years ago or something, but the legend about the Cold Ones says that the Cullens had made the treaty with the tribe leader like generations ago. So what is the actual timeline? And I mean, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it still doesn't make sense to me. We also find out that Edward has been spying on her and watching her sleep and heard her talking in his sleep and saying Edward's name. Edward appears in Bella's bedroom and she rushes out and quickly goes to brush her teeth because she's scared that if he sees some lasagna in her teeth, he's going to leave her. Edward is now much more optimistic about there being an actual chance of them being together because he can control himself slightly better around her. Anyway, in chapter 14, Edward stays the night there and watches her sleep or something, and they profess their undying love for each other, and Edward asks if Bella wants to meet his family, and the only thing she's scared of is what if they don't like her? Not, are they going to kill me? She goes to get dressed to meet her boyfriend's family, and you know what she's fucking wearing? A long khaki colored skirt and a dark blue blouse. What? I guess this is peak fashion. I can't. A long khaki skirt. Edward claims that this is way too sexy and tempting him, so I guess that's what he's into. He kisses her and she like straight up faints. So he takes her to his house and he meets all of the family except for Rosalie and Emmett because Rosalie's not there because she doesn't like Bella, and Emmett's there to, you know, try to calm her down and just reason with her. And we learn a little bit about Carlisle's origin story, and in chapter 16 we find out from Edward that Carlisle grew up in the 1650s in London, and once he was turned and realized what he was, he tried to end his life, but this proved to be impossible. He resisted feeding on humans and secluded himself into the woods, where he quickly realized that there was an alternative source of blood, which was animals. Carlisle then swam to France and traveled all across of Europe, studying in universities, finding his calling, which is saving human lives, which is why he's a doctor now. And after so many centuries, he's basically immune to the scent of human blood. Also, we find out that vampires don't need to breathe. Carlisle had spent some time in Italy with vampires there, but they had disagreements on their diets, which is why Carlisle left on his own until he found Edward and turned him. And Bella is invited to a baseball game, which the vampires only can play when there is a thunderstorm. When Bella returns home, Billy is there with Jacob, and they're waiting for Charlie, who isn't home yet. Billy is there to warn Charlie about Edward / the Cullens, but Bella intercepts that conversation before Charlie gets home. Edward then drives Emmett's giant-ass monster truck where they're gonna play baseball and yeets her on his back the rest of the way. Esme doesn't play baseball with them, but stays with Bella and just very casually tells her that she had lost her baby in her youth, and it is the reason she jumped off a fucking cliff and basically killed herself, but her heart was still beating when Carlisle found her and he turned her, and that's why she's a vampire. The vampires make super loud noise when they hit the aluminium baseball bat against the ball at super ridiculous speeds, so that's why they need the cover of the thunderstorm to play. Their game is interrupted by Alice's vision of 3 vampires that were in the area that heard them playing and were curious and are coming towards them. In chapter 18, the 3 vampires arrive to their field. The Cullens try to be super diplomatic, inviting the 3 vampires, James, Victoria, and Lauren, to their home before they move on to another area, while at the same time trying to find a safe way to get Bella out of there. There, of course, is wind though, and they catch scent of Bella's humanness. Laurent promises not to infringe on their territory and not hunt on their grounds, but all of their eyes are fucking red, and we all know what that means. Edward, Alice, and Emmett get Bella out of there, but Edward has seen in James's mind that he's a tracker and has locked on to Bella and that he will not stop until he has her. So their plan is for Bella to disappear to Phoenix with Alice and Jasper for a few days while the rest of them hunt down the tracker and his girlfriend and kill him, and Edward stays in Forks so that Charlie doesn't think that he has kidnapped her or something. In chapter 19, Bella pretends that she has broken up with Edward, is mad at him and hates Forks, doesn't want to be stuck here like her mom was, throws a tantrum, packs her shit, and leaves. Laurent says that he doesn't want to be in the middle of this and leaves, wishing them luck. They take James off Bella's real path by Esme and Bella changing their clothes so that she can have his scent, and then Bella leaves with Jasper and Alice. 3 make it to Phoenix safely and are waiting for Carlisle's call, and Bella's worried that she has put the Cullens in danger. However, they reassure her that she should only be worrying about herself. Bella gets Alice to tell her how vampires are created, and Alice explains to her briefly the dynamics of how their venom works, and Alice sees another vision. The tracker has changed paths and she sees a dance studio. Then in chapter 21, Alice has another vision, and this time it is of her mom's house, which changes all of their plans. Edward is coming to Phoenix to get Bella, and Alice and Jasper will stay in Phoenix to keep an eye out for her mom. Bella gets a call and it's seemingly from her mother, but turns out James is already there with her and is threatening to kill her mother, coaches her not to alert Alice and Jasper and to get away from them. She writes a goodbye letter to Edward saying that she's sorry, which she disguises as a letter for her mother and gives it to Alice for them to find later. In chapter 22, Bella ditches Alice and Jasper, and I was very curious as to how she would ditch 2 literal fucking vampires. Like in the movie, she just like walks out of the hotel, which is so unrealistic, like they would have noticed. But in the book, it's a little bit more intricate than that. They're at the airport waiting for Edward's flight to land when Bella says that she wants to go get something to eat. Only Jasper goes with her. Then Bella says that she needs to go to the bathroom. Jasper waits outside of the bathroom, but Bella knows that this certain bathroom has 2 exits and she leaves out the other one, and that's how she ditches Jasper and Alice. Anyway, she's told to meet James in the ballet studio around the corner from her mom's house. When she gets there, it turns out that James has been just using a recording of her mom's voice and has tricked her, and her mom is actually safe in Florida. He goes on a very long tangent how it's not just about Bella, it's now about Edward too, because it would be just too easy to kill Bella. He's also filming the whole thing so that Edward sees it and is antagonized by him and hopes that Edward will come after him afterwards. He breaks Bella's legs and yeets her across the studio into glass, which makes her cut herself. She has a head injury, whatever, and she basically passes out. Chapter 23. Bella is drifting in and out of consciousness, but the Cullens have found her and are trying to save her life from broken bones, ribs, head injury, and Bella's hand feels like it's on fire because apparently she has been bitten by James on her hand. There's a chance to save her, and that is if Edward sucks the venom out of the wound. But obviously he's scared that he just won't stop and will kill her, and this I couldn't understand. Why couldn't someone else do it? Like, I understand all the other vampires are not as used to blood and they would also give in to temptation, but Carlisle is the most immune to human blood from all of them, so why couldn't he do it? I don't know. I talk about this later as well. But he does it and he saves her. Bella wakes up in the hospital. The Cullens have called Bella's parents and tell them that the reason she's in the hospital is because she fell down 2 flights of stairs, and through a window. Clumsy old Bella, I guess. And they of course believe that. Her mom visits her and tells her that she can move them to Jacksonville with Phil because Phil got signed permanently to Jacksonville. They won't travel as much. But Bella tells her that she wants to stay in Forks. Edward is being all cryptic again, saying that she should be far away from her, she should probably move to Jacksonville, and he should stay in Forks so that he doesn't put her in danger, etc. But also promises that he's never gonna leave her or whatever. And it's all confusing to Bella all over again, in which I completely understand. His mood swings are crazy. Bella wants to know why he didn't just let her turn into a vampire. It would have made things so much easier. She wants to be a vampire, and that it would just make sense. Edward says he won't do it if there's a chance to save her, and refuses to be the reason her life ends. But Bella guesses that Alice has seen her as a vampire in a vision anyway, so they argue a little bit over it, don't come to an agreement, and Bella falls asleep because she's given more pain medication. And finally, in the epilogue, Edward is taking Bella someplace where they're dressed up, but apparently Bella is super dumb and doesn't realize he's taking her to the prom. We also find out that Tyler is at Bella's house waiting to take her to the prom because he still thinks he's taking her to the prom. Remember that from earlier? Anyway, Edward shuts that down over the phone really quickly. And Bella is mad at Edward for taking her to the prom because she never wanted to go to prom. She's wearing a pretty dress and was made up all by Alice and whatever, and has a giant cast on one of her legs, but it says that she's still wearing a stiletto heel on the other foot. Like, how is this girl walking? I'm pretty sure she can't walk in heels like normally, much less with a giant cast. Like, it seems so ridiculous, especially since it's established like 5,000 times in this book that she couldn't walk across like a straight surface without finding something to trip on, and that's on a good day. Honestly, I was surprised that she wasn't described as wearing like a bright orange turtleneck with a brown skirt or something. Anyway, it's been said like 1,000 times as well that Bella can dance and Bella doesn't dance. So Edward straight up lifts her up and puts her on his feet like a toddler and they dance. Jacob shows up to the prom and he chats with Bella, and apparently his father paid him $20 to go to the prom and talk to Bella. And Billy has asked Jacob to tell Bella to ask her to break up with Edward and that they'll be watching, whatever that means. At this point, Jacob still doesn't believe any of the legends, superstitions, or myths and thinks that's all they are. Bella is disappointed because she thought that they were getting dressed up for some other special occasion, specifically that Edward might have changed his mind and was going to turn Bella into a vampire. And of course, he calls her crazy again. They debated a little bit, and the book ends with Edward pressing his cold lips against Bella's neck. And that's it. Okay, so that was a lot. If you skip through the entirety of me explaining the plot of the Twilight book, I totally understand. If you're still watching this, great. I watched the movie after reading the book just to make sure I remember the plot of the movie right, and just to compare the differences between the two a little bit better. And wow, does the phrase "the book is always better" apply here, because the movie sucked. They didn't ruin it as much as, for example, like Percy Jackson, which, by the way, should I reread Percy Jackson? But wow, was the movie bad compared to the book. Obviously, they had to change a bunch of stuff to fit it all into just a movie, but half of the movie was them just like staring at each other or sighing, and that brought nothing to the plot and just really ruined it. There was no indication of them actually getting to know each other. They were just suddenly in a relationship. At least in the book, they have like, you know, them getting to know each other, like their interests and whatnot. The movie has a very similar plot. It's not changed a lot, but there are some things that differ. For example, in the movie, they introduced the 3 vampires hunting around much earlier. They haven't been killing people in the area in the book as they have in the movie. The way that Bella realizes that Edward is a vampire is different. In the book, she's not so sure of herself that he's an actual vampire. We don't see the vampire fight in the book as they do in the movie. There are no 2 dances in the movie like they are in the book. Also, in the book, the prom is described to be like, you know, really low budget. It was in the gym. It had like balloons and paper decorations. But in the movie, it's a whole ass fairy tale, which like isn't a super important thing, but I just thought it was funny. And while it wasn't major things that were changed about the plot, for example, it was just a difference in portrayal. It was completely different. It was a completely different experience reading the book and watching the movie. And the difference of the portrayal of Edward and Bella's relationship is like night and day. And the movie seemed just so stiff, especially since in the movie we don't really see what Bella thinks or how Bella feels and stuff, so we don't really relate to her as as a character or as a human at all. And look, I love Kristen Stewart, I do, but this was not it. And we all know that no one hates Twilight more than Robert Pattinson himself. And it's no wonder that so many people shit on Twilight, because their actual frame of reference for the story is the movie and not the book. And the movie is so bad and cringy. And I mean, of course, and because teenage girls aren't allowed to like anything, and that's why people shit on Twilight as well. I think the movie experience like really contributes to that. Now, I am also not saying that Twilight is a masterpiece or the best literature of our time. It is clearly meant for a younger audience, and it's with a relatively cheesy, straightforward plot of teenage romance and the supernatural. But the writing is decent and it's really easy to read. And I say that as someone that hasn't read an actual book from start to finish in a really long time, like probably a couple of years. And I actually truly enjoyed reading Twilight. There are some things that obviously just don't make sense, that of course wouldn't be scrutinized by me as a teenager, but just things like, you know, why do they go to high school over and over again? Like, it kind of explains it, but how do they pull it off if they look so fucking old? Again, why do people think that Jasper and Rosalie are twins? I know it's mentioned one time, but like, why put it in there if you're not gonna explain it at all? And what is the timeline of the Cullens and living in Forks and the whole, you know, treaty with the tribe? Do the Cullens just move there and away every few years? Like, doesn't someone's grandparents remember them from the last time they were there? And why was it that it was Edward that had to suck the venom out of Bella's hand? Why didn't Carlisle just do it, since he has the most control over himself? Arguably it's because he was, you know, saving her life as an actual doctor, like, I don't know, stopping bleeding or something. But they clearly had time to like debate about this with Edward, so he clearly had time to just do it himself. So why didn't he? Anyway, we're also going to completely ignore the fact that Stephanie Meyer is a Mormon, and that this whole series is apparently just a giant metaphor for abstinence, and that is possibly a contributing factor to the character's style choices. Basically, I am happy that I reread Twilight. It was fun. Like, 3 likes and I read the rest of the series. That's a joke, but if you guys actually do want to see me talk about books like this, like either the rest of the Twilight series or any book that falls in this similar kind of genre of I read this as a teenager, but it's probably cringe now, let me know down in the comments. Twilight is actually very nostalgic for me because it was literally the first book that got me into reading, and I know I read them in primary school, so probably grade 4 or at the latest grade 5, and I can see why it was such a popular book and why so many teenage girls love this book, and I understand why I liked this book. If you have similar memories to me about Twilight and you want just like an easy read, I very much recommend rereading Twilight. Or if you have only ever seen the movie, go read Twilight. I'm not saying every adult will enjoy this book. There are cringy things, the writing is not, you know, Shakespeare, and it's not a super thought-provoking read either or anything like that, but it was just a lot of fun reading it. So let me know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts on Twilight? Now I just have to edit this monster. See, I promised the tiny hand would be back for the end. But let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are about Twilight. Have you read the books as an adult? Did you read them as a teenager? Have you seen the movie? Did you like the movie? Why? I'll try not to judge you. Anything at all, leave it down in the comments. Any suggestions for any other books that I should revisit. But with that being said, that's it. That's the video. God, if anybody watched all of that, I'll be so fucking amazed. Bye!